Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the first ever episode 13 of Cloud Control, and our first episode for 2023. Happy New Year, everybody, and Happy New Year to you, Kate. Welcome to the show for the start of another great year of podcasting here on Cloud Control.
I know. Where does the time go? But happy 2023 to everyone. I hope 2022 is good, but I hope 2023 is better. And 2024 is like the best year of your life, but we're not there yet, so don't worry.
Every year just is an increasing escalation of getting better and better. That'd be okay.
25 is going down because you got to have like perspective, you know, but
this got to be set in your place every once in a while.
Exactly.
God, that's a little morbid. Okay, I just want to apologize off the bat. My voice might sound a little strange. I have been sick the past week. Of course, I had a week off, so spending it sick is exactly, the perfect excuse to play some video games at least, which is nice, but I just want to mention that off the top. So welcome to the show, everybody. This is our first show of the year. And you know what that means, Kate? It can only be one thing. It's time to make some predictions about what's going to happen in video games for the year. So that will be the main focus of our show today. But before we get into that, we do have a game to talk about as well. So we will do that first before we get into our predictions at the end of the show. And so that game, of course, is something that we teased a little bit on our last episode, giving our awards for the end of last year. But this is As Dusk Falls, a game we completed with our brother Alex, actually. So shout out to you, Alex. Hopefully you're listening to the episode. Maybe you could write an email in and let us know what you thought of the game, and we can read it out. Or if you want to come on the show, you can let us know that too. But this is a narrative adventure, kind of choose your own narrative style branching path game that we love so much. And so Kate, I'll let you kick it off. Maybe a slight synopsis of the story, and what did you think overall of As Dusk Falls?
Adored As Dusk Falls. Anyone who's ever listened to the show, I think, especially last episode, I think it won best multiplayer game from me and best use of new mechanic from you. So that is already a very strong recommendation for a game that, we played for maybe like 8 hours at most.
Something like that.
But it's awesome. It's very much one of the choose your own adventure narrative style games where the gameplay is very light with some little quick timey sort of events, but the vast majority of it is following characters, making decisions for them. And these kind of games have gotten very popular lately, I find, which I'm a big fan of because I really enjoy them. But this one definitely stands out both mechanically and then also story-wise. You follow a few different characters. It kind of starts out, let's say there's a robbery gone wrong.
Yeah, a little bit.
Gone very, very wrong and escalated to extreme measures. But what's neat about the game is instead of kind of following one side of the story, you really get a very complete look. You follow the people committing the robbery, or at least one person out of that group. And they obviously have a sympathetic reason as to why they're doing this. It's getting out of control. But then you also follow one of the guys that is being, I guess not robbed, but he is involved as a victim, right?
Yeah.
So he's being victimized by the other group. And you end up playing a few different characters, but it largely follows the setup and the fallout from that initial event and how it has affected the characters going forward. But it's really tough to root for one side independently because you end up being attached to all of it. And there's a lot of very difficult decisions to be made in this game.
Yeah, there is. And I think one of the interesting things about this game is that it does give you the perspectives of things kind of from all different angles of that main conflict. Because if you were only playing as, say, the one character, Vince, who's the father of a small family, and they're in this hotel while it gets robbed, if you only had his perspective, I think it'd be a lot easier to be well, this family's just a bunch of assholes, and this innocent family and these people working here didn't deserve this, and the fact that it does give you that different perspective, and you can kind of see the events through the eyes of someone who is sort of involved, but at the same time he's hesitant to be there and doesn't really want to be. I think it allows the story to kind of have that complexity and multifaceted nature that would be missing in a game that didn't have this style and those different perspectives. And so I really like the way that the narrative is constructed in that way. Although I will say I don't know how you feel about this, but something I've been reflecting on with this game, because I knew we were going to be talking about it on the show, was I feel for as good as it, as beneficial as it was to have the perspective of those characters, I think I would have done with some more time, specifically with Vince. I would have really liked to have a little bit more time with him and see a bit more of the resolution. Like, I feel like as his story had progressed, we kind of had to fill in some gaps in our minds. Like, oh, I guess he must have resolved this conflict then. Like, we didn't really get to see. And then conversely, we had spent some time with some characters. Like, there's that one scene where we play as that kid on the bike, and he kind of has to get his granola bar out of his backpack and whatever he used to do.
Very
It's very strange.
Yes.
But I'm just like, reflecting on it now, like, do we really need to play as that kid for like an hour when we could have maybe had a bit more time with Vince or some of these other characters that we had a bit more of a connection with? So I wonder what you think about that. But I think overall it is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree about Vince. I think too, because there's a few different conflicts that are about him. Like, obviously, he has the main conflict of being in a hostage situation and how he's going to protect his family. And if you're going to do kind of like the pacifist, like, wait and don't make too much trouble and hope the police sort it out, versus like, is he going to be a bit more of like a proactive, like, try to steal a gun, try to do something, sort of character. And so he's got that going on, but he's also got some conflict in his relationship, in his personal life with the wife. And I feel like we made a pivotal decision regarding her, and it didn't really get addressed much in the game. And it was more of like at the very end when they do the tie up, like what everybody's doing, like, 15 years later. And we got like a little bit of like a progression based in his personal life that just sort of felt like it kind of happened off screen instead of us being more involved. So, but then again, with these kind of games, it's tough to say, because had we chosen different options with Vince, like, we might have had more scenes with him. Like, this game does the really nice thing that games like Detroit do, where after each chapter it shows you these big branching trees, and you see your choices that you made, like what percentage of players made the same choice online. But it also shows you like all the paths that are blacked out that you don't have access to because you went in different directions. And I will say they seemed very extensive. Whether or not they all kind of like culminate in the same few endings, I'm not sure, but at the very least it seems like there's a lot of different ways to get there. So it's possible that we made choices that were just like less Vince than could be. But I do agree that Vince was the character I kind of wish we saw a little bit more of, because I found him so compelling, and maybe one of the more relatable characters.
Yeah. I think I don't know though, because I mean, to counter argue myself just a little bit, I mean, it's I don't mind kind of the ambiguous nature of how a lot of these things end as well, just because I think that sort of thing does contribute to sort of the slice of life aspect of this game. It's not telling some grand narrative in the same way that something Detroit is, or Heavy Rain with like a serial killer kind of story. I guess that one kind of is along the same lines, but it's less finite. This is just like a week in these people's lives, and then it's going to continue on. It's just, there's hundreds of these tragedies all over the place, and it's not to belittle the fact that these things happen, but it is kind of like, it kind of does present itself as a mundane kind of story at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, sort of the way the characters handle these situations, like the police chief's like, oh my god, like these guys again, we've seen this before. Like, it seems like somewhat of a common occurrence, and I think the way that it doesn't necessarily put a bow on all of these little issues is kind of lending itself to that idea as well. Like, this is just sort of a continuous process in this type of environment for these people in this story, and for people like this in real situations. And I think that's one of the reasons why it sort of had that win for Games for Impact at the Game Awards this year as well. Is it's kind of illustrating what life can be like for people who are caught in these type of situations.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like, that's just a testament to how well the characters are written. Like, it must be very difficult to write a character that can be augmented in so many different ways, right? Like, a lot of video games are touted for like having amazing characters and amazing stories, but they are very carefully crafted, and they get from point A to point B in the way that the writers intend for them. But in these kind of games, they need to convey who the character is, but also give you, the player, a lot of control over that. So part of that is exciting because there's a lot of like interpretation of, well, I think this character would do X, or I think this character should do X. instead of why, but they still have to feel very like cohesive, and like every decision that they have the potential to make is something that character might do based on who they are and their situation. And I think this game felt very believable. All the
Hmm.
characters felt very real, and like they could exist in the real world. And I think like with that Games for Impact, it's because the characters are so strong, like that slightly like mundane setting and the events, but also just in the way that they're written. Like no one is like a crazy out of the ordinary character with like, you know, unnatural things going on. Like no one's a massive hero or leader that like steps up and does extraordinary things. It's real people in like real situations that like definitely wouldn't happen to you in your day-to-day life, but would be within the realm of possibility regardless of what you choose, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is, and I definitely want to mention too. Just the we've mentioned a lot of times that it's a branching narrative, kind of pick your own adventure thing. But I mentioned on our awards show that I'd wanted to call out the way it lets you make those choices, and I just in case people haven't listened to that, I want to go over it briefly here too, just because I think it is so smart. Just because this game, for those that don't know, is you can play it on a controller just the same as any other game, but this also uses your phone if you want it. And so if you're sitting in a room with multiple people, you can, instead of passing the controller back and forth and like, okay, you make the first two choices, then you make the next two, or however it works. With this game, it's kind of like that Jackbox party pack feel, where you can all have a little vote on your phone, and then when there's 2, 3, 4 choices on the screen, you can all vote individually, and the winning choice is the majority vote, or you can have a certain number of vetoes amongst your people as well. So I love the way it's set up, and that should just be the standard going forward for all of these style of games, because it is inarguably the best for a multiplayer setting. I think being able to have that sort of voting mechanic involved, and I think it was just ingenious. And I know for us, like personally playing, like regardless of what we say about the content of the game, like we had a lot of fun as well. Just the dynamic of the three of us playing in the same room and like kind of laughing and then deliberating, like, okay, well, we're stuck in this car, where should we look first? Oh, the glove box, or like under the seat, I don't know. And you're like panicking a little bit and kind of deliberating. It's really fun, and there's a certain energy to this style of multiplayer and what this game specifically brings that I don't think you can really get anywhere else, because you're all just trying to do the best in what you would what you think in that situation, and it makes it more fun to have that vote, I think.
Exactly. And especially with like you're so limited in time to pick an option, right? Like when those options pop up on the screen, you have to decide quickly. So you have a little bit of a conversation, but it has to be rushed along, and somebody's voting in the middle of listening to another person's opinion. And what I
Yeah.
love the most about these kind of games, and especially playing them socially, is I find I'm predisposed to sort of play a certain way. And it has, I think you get 2 overrides per chapter, I believe, which is basically like you hit that override button, it doesn't matter what anyone else has voted, your choice goes through. Which is great, because if you feel incredibly strongly about it, you get the override. Or sometimes the override for funny things. I think we were like at a party with one of the
Yeah.
characters, and it was like, are you gonna like try weed? Or it was like
I
some kind
overrode
of
it to
drug.
smoke a joint on top of the barn that one time.
Yeah, that's right. So you overrode it because we were like a straight laced kid, and we're like, no, we're doing drugs. Like just some kind of funny moments like that. But so the override is nice to gain that little bit of control for certain moments. But at the same time, like even in like a game, if I was playing by myself, I would be predisposed. I'd pick kind of similar sort of options. I would have a developed play style, but when you're playing with people and you are not in control, you end up sometimes with options that you would never would have picked otherwise. And you get outvoted, right? It's like, I really think that this is the best option. 2 other people have voted against for a different option, and I'm stuck into it. But that maybe makes for a more interesting
I
story.
think it does,
I
for
think
sure.
so. Like, there's so much more variety, and it plays out in different ways, and it's just an experience you wouldn't have gotten otherwise without that style of mechanic. And I appreciate that a lot. The other thing about this game too, and the choices, is that they were tough. Like a lot of times in a game, you get choices that are they can be ambiguous, but sometimes it's like this is the aggressive option, this is the like feeble option, this is the like try to be really kind option. And sometimes this game has sort of obvious choices, but a lot of the times they're things that like really could go any way, and they're a lot more complicated than just being like a type of attitude toward a situation. They are very difficult choices that you really cannot foresee what the consequences will be, which I
Hmm.
think adds so much more to the game of like, oh my god, I hope we chose well. Like now we just have to see what happens, and it is shocking sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I remember back, like just to illustrate that point just a little bit. Early on, you're sort of in this kind of hostage situation, and there's one person that's like you're trying to kind of make friends and kind of keep your family safe by playing along. But there's this other party that's like, no, these people have something in mind, and you need to get it back for me. Like they have this little book, and it's got some information written in it, and I need it back, and you're gonna get them. And you're kind of having to choose at the same time, like, well, I don't really want to piss either of these people off because I mean, either one could put me in danger, but I'm trying to, kind of string them both along. And at the same time, like, eventually you're going to have to disappoint one of them. Like you're going to be found
Yeah.
out, like you're only kind of delaying the inevitable and just that level of tension. And then, like you say, like, there's not a good option, but each of us would deal with that a slightly different way. Like maybe I would have been a bit more active in trying to get the book, and maybe you'd be trying to like hide in the corner or something like that. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting kind of trying to meld those strategies and how the vote
Yeah.
comes in, especially since we had an odd number of people as well, which I think is,
Mhm.
a little bonus for this type of thing for sure. But I think the last thing I wanted to bring up, just because it is so striking when people talk about this game, is the art direction, the art style of the game.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty controversial, and I can completely understand why. It really doesn't look similar to anything that I've ever really seen before. It's sort of like that flip book. It's almost like a watercolor comic style that it kind of
Mhm.
has, and like it moves in kind of stop motion sort of ways. It is sort of weird, but I kind of feel like the reason it happened this way was just because they obviously put a lot of work into the writing and the narrative. Maybe they were, trying to save a bit of time. It's not the hugest scope of game. I mean, it's not like it's a small budget thing by any means. It is like an Xbox, studios game, but at the same time, maybe they could get it out a little quicker without having to do fully animated cutscenes and whatnot. And rather than just having still images, they decided to go for something kind of unique. And so I guess where I'm coming out on it, is I'm kind of just indifferent, to be honest, which is weird to say because it is such a polarizing art
Yeah.
style. But I think I originally didn't love the way that it moved, but as we played, got one or two chapters in, I think you just kind of get used to the way that it looks. And I think for
Mhm.
certain points of the thing that actually, or certain points of the game, it actually almost enhance some of the moments that get you linger on like a minute where someone gets shot at, or there's an emotional beat. Like it kind of stays there and for a second in a way that a game like Detroit or something maybe even wouldn't. And it could be maybe even more emotionally impactful, but I wouldn't say it's maybe my favorite thing in the world at the same time. But I'm interested to see what you say.
Interesting point. I think I was kind of similar to you where I wasn't quite as um unsure about it at first, but it definitely grew on me. Like I didn't love it at the beginning and it can feel a little jarring. But I think the voice acting is so strong in this game. Like it is incredibly well done that carries it at the beginning when you're sort of at a disconnect with what you're looking at. But by after playing an hour or so of the game, I think I was on board with it. Like it started to kind of click and feel more natural. Um, and I agree. Like I think it actually enhanced certain moments in terms of like the lingering, like you said. But I think there was also times where not watching something play out and just kind of listening to the dialogue while having the still images come one after the other almost made some scenes feel a little bit more ambiguous,
Mm.
which I like because there's definitely like an element of mystery going on, especially like the ending is pretty crazy. Like there's definitely like some characters have secrets and there's some cliffhangers and there's definitely some points where you don't know if something's gone well and it's going to all of a sudden turn on its head. Um and so some of the art style actually like added this tension where if you just watched it play out more cinematically, it would maybe have been a bit more clear as to what was happening, or like a character's expression might have given away if they were lying to you or not. But because it's got that little bit of like artistic styling that sort of hides a little bit or like makes it a little bit blurrier to tell visually what's happening, it sort of adds a little bit to the tension of some
Yeah.
choices that I think, I don't know if that was intentional, but it works really well.
You know what? Hearing you describe that brings something to my mind so clearly. And you know what it is? It's the same style that they use at the start of every case in Phoenix Wright, when you sort of watch that little vignette of the crime and what happens.
Yes,
But you don't really get
right.
to fill in all the blanks. Like you'll see a pistol and someone gets shot on a boat and their body goes in the lake, but it's like you can't see who the shadowy figure holding the gun is. You don't get exactly what's going on. So it gives you that little bit of information, but not everything. And it's kind of like how this game shows you what's happening. And you fill the blanks in your mind as well. So cool point. And a good reference to one of the classic and best video game visual novels of all time. Although not a choose your own adventure style, so it's a little different.
Not a choose your own adventure. But where have some of the roots come from for this genre, possibly?
That's right. Well, great game, everybody. Play As Dusk Falls. It is on Game Pass, so you really have no reason not to. Get a few friends together, too, because it is a fun time with a group. So let's transition to the second half of the show today, Kate, which is, of course, as every gaming podcast must do at the start of the year, predictions for the upcoming year and the video game industry. But before we talk about 2023, we just want to reflect a little bit on the year that was and go back over our predictions from last year, because we had a competition last year between the two of us of who could get the most points between 5 different predictions that we made for the year of 2022 last year. Kate has put together the effort to go through and tabulate our scores, and the winner of this competition will be able to select one game that the loser must play at some point throughout this year. So I'm very interested to see how we did. I honestly can't remember a single thing that either of us had predicted, so I cannot wait to hear the stupid things that we came up with, and I just honestly hope that we got at least like one of them right between the two of us. So take it away, Kate. Let's hear it.
This was a blast to look through. I mean, some of these predictions were wild at the time, but even wilder looking back on.
Yeah, I mean, we go for some funny stuff. We don't always go super serious, but
before we get to our own predictions, we did have some friends write in from Plastic Hearts Podcast, and they gave us a prediction to read out in addition to ours, and they absolutely sniped it. Their prediction was, we will see The Last of Us PS5 remake coinciding with the HBO show, which we absolutely did, because part 1 came out relatively recently, and of course the HBO show is set to come out on January 15th. So yeah, that was a total slam dunk, and they may have sort of embarrassed us for the rest of the award. So, James, I will give you the option. Would you like to hear mine first and then know what you're up against? Or do you want to hear yours first and go into mine with either the confidence or lack thereof?
Jeez. Well, I just want to say, first of all, congrats to Fonz for that prediction. That was great. So shout out to you, my friend. Wow. I can't remember if we had any kind of rumors about a show coming out or a remaster at that time, so I'd be interested to know if he kind of just, latched onto that rumor.
I think we knew about the show, but not about the remake.
I mean, either way, great call. Great call.
But yeah,
you know absolutely. What? Let's do it in I feel like you usually go first for these type of things, and I pass it off to you. So I'll pass it off to you. You can tell me your predictions from last year first.
Well, my first prediction is a win right out the start, that Elden Ring wins Game of the Year. And it will also be my personal game of the year. And of course, both of those things happened.
Okay, that's a point for you.
That is a point right out the gate.
Okay.
My second one was extra funny because it was actually a prediction for 2021 that I carried over because it had yet to be fulfilled, in that Persona 6 is going to be announced. And the color of the game, because obviously they're all color schemed, is going to be purple. And we have had zero news, not a whisper of Persona 6 over 2022. So that's a loser.
Well, that's fine.
Third, I hit on another one. GoldenEye turned 25 years in 2022, and it would get a remaster that included the nostalgic jank of the original, which it did.
Excellent.
Or at least it was announced. So
it's getting remade. We can't really comment on the jank at this time, but you know what? I think that's a point for you, Kate. That's still a great prediction. It'd be pretty mean to take away a half point because you can't judge it for the jank.
That is true. So yeah, congratulations and happy anniversary to GoldenEye. My last two, Joseph Ferris goes full Kojima and unveils the wildest, weirdest couch co-op game at the Game Awards. He was there to read out Elden Ring's victory, but he did not announce anything himself. And then finally, I guessed that the PS5 would get a Ragnarok edition with cool plates.
Shocked it
But
didn't
that
happen.
I know, because we got the controller. And I even went into a lot of specificity on this one that they will not sell the plates separately. You'd have to just buy the console. And then I went on to presume that I would have a horrible decision of, do I buy someone scalping $200 plates online for my PS5? Unfortunately for me, no point. But luckily for me, I was not put in that treacherous situation.
Okay, so kind of a win-win. Okay.
Kind of win-win.
Hey, 2 points though. That's pretty good.
That is 2 points for me. Out of guessing 5 predictions, I have come up a point ahead of the Plastic Hearts podcast with their one guess.
Okay, well, I gotta admit to you, I'm feeling pretty worried about getting more than 2 points. I think I'm gonna lose, but let's hope I did okay.
So your first prediction was that God of War, Horizon, and Elden Ring will all be like nominated for Game of the Year, but none of them will win. So
that was just playing the field, playing the numbers.
The first half of that, absolutely true. The second half of that, not even close.
Okay.
So that's out. Your next one is that Nintendo would announce a new Fire Emblem game, which they did, but 2033 will not show a lot of gameplay. We joked about that Waluigi would be in it for some reason. We were let down about that. But then you put the nail in the coffin on this guess, saying it will be a futuristic setting with like medieval roots, but a lot of modern tech.
Oh, I feel like that kind of is what this game is, isn't it?
Is there
Fire
modern
Emblem
tech in this game?
What's it called again? Fire Emblem Engage.
I have no idea. Engage.
I know there's. I don't know. They kind of look like they have futury armor, but you're right. It is kind of still medievally.
It's
just that red and blue medievally look that they have.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be willing to give you a half point.
I think a half point. I mean, I called Fire Emblem.
You did call Fire Emblem. And have they shown a lot of gameplay? I don't think they have.
You know what? Not as much as I'm going to look up right now, so I won't take a half point. I'll take just a half point. I'll take the half point.
We'll give you a half point. Okay, you're going to need it. Because moving on, Sony will acquire 3 more studios, and one of them will be Contact Entertainment, the VR studio that made Fireball Zero Hour on PSVR. And I looked this up ahead of the show, and I could not see anything about this, so I don't believe that they did not. Them.
They did not, but it is interesting. There's a sequel to that game coming out on the PSVR too, so I kind of had something. But I won't take a point.
You may get retroactive points, but that might be a 2023 prediction you could carry forward
that's true.
if you so choose. Next, we have The Last of Us TV show is a big hit. The show will be very quickly confirmed for season 2, and the second season will be rumored to focus on Joel's story before the outbreak, which I don't think is true, but I would really like it to be true.
Now, here's an interesting thing. I feel as though it's already been confirmed for season 2 for that show. But I feel like it's also a rumor thing, so I'm not going to try and take a point for that. It's not even out yet. Also, we can't even review it. So
yeah, the show isn't even out yet. And then finally, you made the best prediction of all of 2022 in that Fable will be Xbox's big marketing push for exclusives. But double inspired by the Xbox mini fridge meme. Remember when that came out?
Oh my god, this prediction.
So you brought up that Xbox made that like mini fridge.
Oh my god, the beer line.
Thing, and it was real. So you said Fable was gonna come out. You said that the mini fridge you need things to put in it, right? Like you're getting tired of your Gatorade, that G Fuel only goes so far, right? So you were like, Fable's coming out, and to market it, they're getting Fable ales to go in your fridge.
Oh, it's such a bad prediction.
I love this one. I wrote down beside it in big brackets like LOL, and then I will buy you some if they're real. But unfortunately, even though that is what consumers deserve, it is not what Xbox
sometimes the best predictions are the ones that don't come true, and that is certainly one of them. So I guess that makes you the winner of our competition from last year, Kate.
It does indeed make me the winner of our competition.
So I'll reveal to you right now, if I had have won this competition, I would have gotten you to play Shovel Knight this year, the first Shovel Knight campaign, because I know you've tried a little bit, and I just adore that game so much. And that's would have been my pick, but I guess I'll have to wait until my predictions coming up here in a few minutes are right the start of next year. Before I get that.
The start of 2024, I might be playing Shovel Knight.
Exactly. So
that's not the worst way to start a year off.
It's really not. It's really not. But I need to know now. So you've won. What game do I need to play this year?
Okay. So I've got to ask you, double check you have not played this game, because I've got a backup in case you haven't. Okay. But have you played SteamWorld Quest?
I have played every SteamWorld game. I love SteamWorld.
You have played Quest, the card game one?
Yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Okay, good. I knew you'd like that game. It's very good. Okay, then to get off of that track, my backup game is a game that I remembered for our last episode and just remembered how enamored I am by it, that I think you should, and you can Steam share it for me, so this is totally free. You should play some Fury, because that game is fucking wild.
Cool.
It's short, it's quick, it's snappy. You're going to like it. The music is so good too, so...
All right, I'm in. Play some Fury. I'll be playing Fury at some point this year, and you know what? I might even do it soon, because I gotta do something short and snappy before I get into Plague Tale. I just beat God of War for people. We haven't talked about it yet. I beat that game a few days ago. Can't jump right into Plague Tale. Maybe Fury's a nice kind of fill in the gap little game there for me.
Cleanser.
Yeah, a little palate cleanser. Whew, okay, well, let's get into our predictions for this year. Before we do our main predictions, I did put out a couple of polls just on the Cloud Control Twitter for the 2 hot button topics I could think of, which I think we should just put our little guess in for 2023 as a collective. So the first one is, will a Switch Pro be announced in 2023? Because this is one of those things that people just love to debate on the internet. There's rumors all the time.
Every year.
It always comes up. And so I thought, just in case, instead of doing a whole prediction, let's just put out a poll. And so right now it's sitting at 10% of respondents say it will, and 90% say it will not. And I got to tell you, I'm in the will not camp. There was a time when I thought there was going to be, and it's just been so long now. I'm like, you know what? They're not going to do a Switch Pro. It's just going to be the sequel console, whatever's coming next at this point is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's exactly the camp I'm in. In 2 months, I think March 3rd is the 6-year anniversary of the Switch, and it's just too late for the Pro version. Like you're working on the next console already. That's all there is to it. Exactly.
And the second poll we put out was an early Game of the Year prediction for 2023. Of course, there's still a lot of games to come that we don't even know about, so this is very, very early. But right now, the options were Starfield, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Right now being led by Tears of the Kingdom's 47%, Spider-Man 2 at 29%. We also have an option to write in comments, which has also got a couple of votes. Number 1, Jazz Deep writes in, says Mega Man Battle Network Collection, a game which I'm going to love, but I somehow don't think is going to be on the GOTY ballot, although I wish it was. Kate, you wrote in yourself Silk Song. Now that is a good contender, but will it come out? Who the hell knows? And then Mike writes in too, Bloodborne 2 Cosmic Boogaloo. Bloodborne 2 gets announced, instant contender. If it's called Cosmic Boogaloo, it's gonna win for sure. There is literally no debate about that.
No, absolutely.
So there's where we're at on the Twitter poll questions, which I guess, Kate, unless you had any last respondents online on your end, we'll get into our predictions for the year.
Yeah, I think I'm ready. I mean, I've showed up my Silk Song, James. So where are you on this?
That's right. Well, I voted for Zelda to win. I mean, it wouldn't be my pick, but I honestly can't envision that game coming out and just not winning at this point. At least at this point on January 2nd, 2023. That's my stance right now. So if that changes, we'll see. But Kate, I will give you the honor if you'd like to start us off with our 2023 predictions. And let me just be the first to say, best of luck for this year's competition for predictions.
Best of luck for this. And to you as well, best of luck. I hope to win 2 years in a row, but, we'll see. So my first prediction, and it's kind of a trend I've started. We both started out last year with a Game of the Year prediction, so I'm going to start this year out hot with the same kind of idea. And I'm going to say that an indie game is winning Game of the Year. And by indie game, I mean a massive AAA studio, like no Elden Rings, no God of Wars. And the specification for this is it's a studio that has never won before. So a new studio coming out on the scene to win a Game of the Year that they've never managed to do. I mean, Silk Song was in my mind for this for sure. Like Team Cherry coming up. It's 3 guys that work on Silk Song and Hollow Knight. obviously one of the hottest anticipated games. I see your Legend of Zelda whatever kingdom, and I raise you Team Cherry's magnum opus that will be Silksong.
Okay. I like that prediction a lot. I want to clarify one thing, though, just for scoring purposes later on, and the definition of indie, because this is getting so big and blown up. What's an indie these days? I think one clear clarification that needs to be included for this prediction is that it can't be published by a major like publisher then.
Yeah. So the clarification to this is, it's not going to be published by a major publisher, or the clarification is that it's not a full price $80 game. That's what
okay, because that's not always indie then, though, because sometimes like other studios release games for not full price.
That's true. I'm gonna say the two like kind of like technical clarifications on this is that it's a studio that has never won a Game of the Year before, and it is not a full price game. So like it's not like the behemoth, like those massive games like God of War will always be full price, right? Because they charge it, but this is going to be a studio that considers themselves a little smaller and is not going to charge that $80 price tag.
I like this prediction a lot. This is making me really think. I want to make some kind of like clear rules of like what are these things, because we need, as an industry, the games industry needs new terms besides AAA and indie. There's so many gray areas.
We have made like what is essentially the equivalent of like there's a middle class that has come out in the gaming world, and like it is an indie game is sometimes a Kojima studio and sometimes the three guys that work on Hollow Knight.
Now I've heard an interesting term called triple I. Like Kojima would be a triple I, like a full budget indie studio. Because basically all indie means is that it's not owned by a PlayStation or Xbox. Like you can be an indie studio with billions of dollars in your wallet if you're owned by someone else.
That's true. It comes down to the resources and the budget the game has that matters more. And I like triple I. I think that's cute.
Triple I. Like Kojima's triple I. Team Cherry, regular indie. I like it.
Yeah, I'm going regular.
Okay, I like it.
I mean, Hades 2 might come out too. Like I wrote this before Hades 2 was announced, and I was like, holy shit, that just might shoe me in. But I'm still kind of banking Silksong a little bit.
Okay, I like that too. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna change the order of my my predictions here, because I do have one about Game of the Year as well. So I'll do that one first. Here's my first prediction. So PSVR 2, we know this is about indies, trust me. Kind of. A little bit. So PSVR 2 is coming out this year. We know it has this outrageous price model, which is like way too expensive, and very few people compared to like that would have been interested will probably like not be able to buy it right away. All these problems. However, regardless of the pricing and like the console itself, I think it will be a big boost for like VR discussion in general, because it's a new console coming on the market. It's the PSVR 2. There's also the Meta Quest and all these other headsets, right? So it's kind of like a growing industry, big competitor coming in. And so my prediction is that, despite like the sales numbers maybe not being so great, and it might not even be a PSVR 2 game that has this, I think 2023 will be the first year that a VR game is a nominee for Game of the Year. And I think it doesn't have to win necessarily, but I think a VR game will be included as a nominee. And I think it's just, I've got an article here. There's Horizon Call of the Mountain coming. There's that game Behemoth we saw at the Game Awards, which we were like, wow, that looks so good. Like, oh, it's an indie game. That's too bad. There's the Dark Pictures game coming. There's some Resident Evil projects. There's an Assassin's Creed Nexus game. These are all names that we know. And Asobo's working on something. They made the original Astro's Rescue Mission. Could they be returning to VR for PSVR 2? Like, we don't know. There could be the next game coming, like Beat Saber. Like, one of these years, there is going to be a game which breaks through. And I think this will be the year, I'll say, between all these games, one of them will be just good enough to make a nominee for Game of the Year.
That is interesting. And now to clarify, like, this is a game that's like VR first. It's not like like Village. Village was a regular game and then got VR later, but it was like a regular game first. Like, this is a purely like intended to be VR experience.
I don't know if that would even qualify. Like, if they remade a game previously. I guess I didn't think that far ahead. Like, if they were to remake a game in VR that wasn't originally VR, and that remake, I think that could count, right? Because like a remake for...
I think it counts. My meaning is like, not like a remake, but like a game that's been out for 2 months gets like, you can now play it in VR, even though it was like released without VR first.
I would argue that should still count, because I think there's more that goes into it than just simply translating a game into VR. The amount of considerations that need to be made to adapt a game, say like Resident Evil, into a VR and still make it work in a way that are like, that's a big change. Way more than we would anticipate, I think, to like translate a game that way. So I would say that still counts. If they do a good enough job to get it nominated for Game of the Year, like damn well, that'd taken a point.
Okay. But it doesn't count if it's the non-VR version that gets
No. The VR game has to
nominated.
be
Yeah.
nominated. Yeah. It
Okay,
has to be
that's what I
like
mean.
the
Like,
VR version
it
has to be
can't be like
nominated.
oh, but you can also play it in VR, but they're
No.
nominating like
Tetris Effect, for example. Tetris Effect is a game. It's a Tetris game. It has a VR mode included, but it's one package. If that was nominated in its year, it would not count. It would have to be like the VR version of whatever game, explicitly saying like VR.
Okay, good. That is what I assumed you meant. And that is a really interesting prediction because I don't know if that's happening in 2023, but you're right that is an inevitability that it's going to happen at some point.
That's just what I'm playing, so we'll see. We'll see. I honestly thought it was going to be that Half-Life Alyx game the other year, but it didn't even make it either. So that kind of makes me a little bit less confident because if Half-Life couldn't do it, are these going to do it? Who knows? But I hope so.
That is cool, but yeah, Horizon might just be big enough, right? Like,
could be. Eventually there's going to be a game that takes over Beat Saber's crown on VR as like the rhythm thing, right? Like, there's got to be an innovation eventually.
That's true.
It's been long enough where someone could have been developing something. You don't know.
That's true. Beat Saber's fucking big though.
It is.
Okay. I another one. The other tradition I love to do with these is I love to look at anniversaries of like what games are having big years. And so I'll cut right to the chase on this one. Is that it is Spyro's 25th anniversary in 2023. So happy birthday, Spyro! Obviously, the comparison to make here is that Crash Bandicoot has come back in a big way in terms of like old Sony games. So I think Spyro's coming back, and we're going to get a brand new Spyro announcement. And I think it's going to be kind of more of like, not an open world, but kind of like Mario 64-esque, where you have like a hub area, and then you have a mechanic, kind of like, I guess, like Spyro the Dragon did sort of thing, right? Where you have that kind of like hub area, and then you could go through those portals into big areas. But instead of being like small levels, they're going to kind of like teleport you. So it's going to be like sort of open world, but it's going to be like open world in defined areas.
Okay, so it's open zone, like Sonic Frontiers.
Open zone, yeah, exactly. We're gonna get Spyro, a totally new Spyro game, open zone. And I've even put a little note to myself because Year of the Dragon had this. And as a little asterisk extra note, there will unfortunately be a skateboarding minigame.
Love it. Great prediction. Will Toys for Bob be designing it? This doesn't have to be for a point. Will this be from Toys for Bob, or will they be too busy within a Crash and it'll be some other Activision team?
Toys for Bob might be too big, but I think it'd be really cool if Toys for Bob somehow ended up doing both. That would be awesome.
Okay. Cool prediction. I like it. Okay, I'm going to go with my most boring one because the rest of mine are kind of fun. So here's my most boring one. It is that Xbox Game Pass will remain the best deal in gaming because it is, and you can't argue otherwise. But this will mark the first year where I think there's a little bit of conversation of like, oh, maybe this isn't quite as great as it used to be. In comparison to people just being like universally, this is amazing right now. I think there'll be a price increase at some point this year. I think it'll be maybe like $5 or $10, like not a whole lot per month, but it'll just be that little bit where you kind of, it's from a no-brainer now to like, oh, do I really want to spend $30 a month on Game Pass kind of thing for some people. And I think that because that's kind of an easier prediction, it's kind of minimal. Because I know also there was the increased price of like the first party games, or there was a couple months ago, remember we had that news story. So I think that kind of ties in there. But my other part of this prediction, I guess, along with the price bump, they're going to have to be like, oh, but don't worry, it's worth it. We're going to sweeten it for you. So I think to justify the price bump, they're going to use one of these two following excuses, which is I'm going to qualify my half point with this so it's not too easy. Okay. So they're to justify the price increase, they're either going to really make a statement that like PC Game Pass is now like day and date with console, like it's a universal experience. So we're really going to acknowledge that PC is not quite up to snuff, and we want to like, you're paying more, but it's like a better service for you. Will be the first thing they say. Or the second idea will be that because sometimes they include like partnerships, like there's a Disney Plus sort of subscription. So I'll say that the second idea how they could do it would be they'll make some kind of partnership with one of the sports streaming services like NFL Red Zone or DAZN, like DAZN. And I actually wrote in brackets beside this because of your face, brackets, which a lot of people will groan about because there is not a lot of crossover between sports and gamers.
Yes, I am frowning hard on this one.
That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
frowning on this one because I could totally see that happening because they love to do that. Like, yeah, we've made it more expensive, but we've also like added
Mhm.
in extra stuff. And it's like, I don't care about that extra stuff. Like, I
Yeah, I just
would
want it to be
never
cheaper,
like
right?
choose to also buy this.
Yeah.
Like,
But here's the thing, the reason I say this is going to happen, and the reason I think that sports partnership could be something I'd be a little bit more confident in, is because by all accounts, this is the year we're getting the Xbox streaming app and the little stick you can put in your USB stick you can put in your TV. So if people are already buying the stick, they're trying to sell it to you. What better way than to give
mhm.
you like NFL Red Zone on there for all those people that just love football? You can just stream it from the same stick as your Xbox. So
Yeah,
that's
I
that.
think like this is probably gonna happen. And I guess to be fair, like if Game Pass is a good deal instead of an outrageously good deal,
Yeah.
it's hard to complain. But it's just like, damn, am I used to having this like beautiful, wonderful deal
Yeah, I mean,
um
I think it still will
already?
be a great deal. I just think this is the year that it's kind of questioned a little bit more than others, just because of
Yeah,
these couple factors,
it will
basically.
start to garner some
Exactly,
criticism.
because these
Fair
things don't
enough.
go forever. Like they can't.
That is true. Okay, interesting, interesting. I'm gonna go for number 3 with my funniest prediction of the year, which is that, as we talked about in our preview or our review of 2022, that Persona 6 is nowhere to be seen. So for the third year running, I would like to refresh that we're gonna hear about Persona 6 this year. It exists. They're going to announce it, and of course, the color scheme is still going to be purple. I feel as confident about it today as I did back at the end of 2021. So, come on, Persona 6 Purple Edition.
Okay. Um. Okay. Well, this is interesting. Then is that all your details about Persona?
Yeah, I think I'm just refreshing. There's nothing new to be added to it. It's just like it hasn't happened yet. It's still gonna happen. I was just wrong on the timeline.
Okay. So I have a Persona 6 prediction as well for my third one. So I will, because I kind of remembered you made one, so I wanted to throw mine own in there. And also, I feel kind of confident that it's going to happen this year, just because Atlas has kind of been saying a lot about Persona recently. You know, they always are saying there's new games coming. And I think this is the year because they just did the 3 and 4 re-release on like Game Pass and Switch and all this stuff. So what do they really have left in the tank for Persona now that those games have been released? Like, of course, it's Persona 6. It's got to come. But instead of choosing a color, I'm going to predict something else about the game besides it being announced this year. And I'm going to predict that because of Persona 5's success in the West, that this is actually the first Persona game set in America instead of Japan.
Oh,
I'm going
interesting.
to say it's their take on what American high school life would be like with like, the fraternity, or I guess that's like college, but something like that instead of Japan. It will be my guess.
That is really interesting. That would really change it up because yeah, it's been kind of like similar-ish sort of like slice of life plus all this other crazy shit going on
Hmm.
for Japan, but that's
Yeah,
neat.
like I could
I
see
You know
some
what I
like
thought you were gonna
New York style, like
yeah.
kids high school type of inner city type of vibe. Could see that.
What's cool about this is that we have two different predictions that could parallel and be actually correct together,
That's right.
which
That's right.
is neat.
So we'll
Interesting. I
see. I
like that.
just hope it
I
gets
hope
announced. I don't care which of us is right. I
yeah.
just want Persona
I don't
6.
care. Yeah, exactly. That's the important part about here is that please, I hope Persona 6 exists.
Yeah.
All right, for my penultimate prediction, I'm going into the realm of TV because obviously we've had some very, very wonderful TV adaptations of games. Shout out to Arcane just being one of the best shows
Oh,
ever
so
made,
good.
regardless of its video game connection. Obviously, we're hella excited for The Last of Us coming up soon. And I was racking my brain, like, what would be another good show? Apparently, like, God of War is getting a TV show, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Twisted Metal, don't
Um,
forget.
Twisted Metal. And so I was thinking to myself, what other games would translate well into TV? And I played with the idea of Days Gone just because that was a game that didn't get a lot of
Mm.
love, but kind of had like an interesting world. But I thought, that one's kind of been put to rest. And then it came across my mind the show or the best game that would be turned into a show is Red Dead Redemption Universe
Oh,
because
wow.
that has an insanely good cast of characters. It spans a huge timeline with both of the games. There's so much to explore. It's in a really interesting time period that doesn't get turned into TV very often. Like westerns are kind of not really a thing, and when they are, they're not grounded in the same way that Red Dead is.
Yeah, and they're usually
Um,
movies too, like historically.
yeah, Exactly. So I thought like not only does it translate well, but it's also got like a niche that hasn't really been taken advantage of in the recent years in television. And so I want to put my money in my cowboy hat and say that Red Dead Redemption universe coming for a TV show.
I want to put my money in my cowboy hat. That's the greatest quote I've ever seen. I
And
love it.
I'm doing it.
I love it.
It
Okay, I
would be
like that
so
one.
good. I'd watch it out of that show.
So who do you think it'll be, like centered around John Marston, or like will it be a different cast kind of just in the the
See,
realm of Red Dead?
that one's tough because like the Arthur, I think like you got to start more in like Arthur Morgan time because like that
Mm,
is canonically like first, even though it's the
yeah.
second game. So and the idea is like they're very much centered around like the time of outlaws and gangs and like that period of history dying out and things becoming a lot more like reformed and a lot more like government controlled. And so I think if you want to tell that sort of story, you start like with the gang and then go into its fallout. So I think you
Hmm.
start with more like Arthur Morgan, but it doesn't have to necessarily follow that character. It can just be the gang in general, right? Like Dutch would be a big character, and John Marston would be there, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he'd have the romance plot going on because he eventually like gets married, and so
Very interesting. I think that's a really, really good idea, especially because it's Rockstar as well. Like that's
yeah,
the kind of company that would have the funds to sort of fund
yeah.
a TV show that size.
Exactly. And it's got characters, it's got drama, it would have action, there would be
Hmm.
shootouts, like, it's got everything that TV
Exactly,
needs.
exactly. And they could have the same kind of thing where like Neil Druckmann's been so connected to the Last of Us TV show to be like the liaison between the source material and the TV
Mhm,
studio. Like they could easily do the same thing with someone from the writing team on the Red Dead Redemption game as well. Great call. I
mhm,
really like that a lot.
mhm,
Okay, well, I have a prediction that is somewhat related to a TV show or movie. So I'll go with that one next, which is that so we all know the Mario movie is coming out this
mhm.
year, featuring Chris
Yes.
Pratt as Mario and a host of other great celebrities as the rest of the cast. So this
Mhm,
is obviously something that is going to be huge. It's Mario, like one of the most recognizable characters on the planet. They're obviously going to want to take advantage of his newfound, even higher level of popularity with this movie. So they're going to have something coming out, a bunch of stuff coming out actually, around Mario. And one of those things is going to be a new 3D Mario game because we haven't had one since 2017, I think, was Mario Odyssey. It's been
mhm.
a long time since
Yeah,
we've had one of those. I
not
mean, there was the Bowser's Fury kind of
yeah.
DLC thing, but that's not a full game in the same way. So I think we're gonna get a new 3D Mario this year, and but this is where I go off the rails and lose myself all the points, or at least I
That's
lose
okay.
myself the half point. So I guess the
Mhm,
first part is that we're getting a new 3D Mario this year will be my
okay.
prediction.
Yeah.
But the interesting part about this game is that because the movie has done such a good job of making these other characters that people may not know as well, Luigi, Toad, Peach, Donkey Kong, these four. These will
Mhm,
be the new game will leverage these four characters heavily because people will now like know more who they are. Not that they don't already, but the game will be sort of an Odyssey style game. But there'll be, instead of a bunch of different worlds, there'll be like four different ones, and in each one you will play as one of those four characters, and they'll all have their own move set kind of thing. And it'll be like they're trying to save Mario from this like problem that he's in, or like he's been captured or something, because the movie is like Luigi is captured, so this will be like Mario.
mhm.
And then of course once you save Mario, and you'll get to play as him as well, and the last like little bit of the game will be like his Mario world and whatnot. But I think those other characters will be playable, and it'll be like going to different worlds with each of them in a new 3D Mario game. So that'll be fun, won't it?
That I'm on this because I like the idea of it, but I also think like the things people love about those 3D Mario games is like how tight the controls are.
Mm-hmm.
Like mastering like cap jumping in Odyssey and like finding those like speed run routes to get up to places way faster because you figured out like where you can jump from
Mm-hmm.
is so integral to like what people like about those games that it would be very difficult to make four characters that are all different but still feel equally satisfying to play versus like, oh fuck, I'm at the Toad section, like he can't jump as high and so he sucks. But I also really like it in terms of like they could really go totally off script and do some like really wild and creative things.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was coming from, because hear me out. Two things, there is precedent for it. Number one, Nintendo has done it before in the 2D kind of space, right? You have those, whichever Super
Mhm.
Mario Advance 2 or whichever original game that
Yeah,
was.
with the Dream World or
Yeah,
whatever.
where
Yeah,
you can like
and
play as
more.
the other characters. But I think
Mhm.
what kind of my idea was for that, because I agree with you, Nintendo loves to finally tune these worlds and let you play with the different mechanics. And I think where I was thinking Odyssey has a bunch of different skills. There's the different capture mechanics, and some are more advanced than others, but there's different sections and puzzles built around each of them. That maybe for this game, I was thinking there would be sort of in the way you were describing zones earlier. There's less individual levels, but each one of the few is like, this is tuned specifically to Luigi's moveset. And we're Nintendo and we know Luigi as a character, and we've developed him enough with his own full moveset, as well as each of these like Luigi, Toad, DK. And they all have their own bigger or like more fully realized space individually for each of them to explore, and then Mario as well. And so just a bit of a different take on the sort of different control schemes you could have.
That's interesting. I think what I would really enjoy, just as an initial thought about this idea, is something like a kind of like a compromise where you play as Mario for maybe like still 80% of the game because he's just the most satisfying character. But then you kind of almost like sort of how Paper Mario has those like in between chapters where you play as like
Mm-hmm.
Bowser and Peach. You would have like in between sections of the game or like small like side sections where you did have those other characters to play. So like they felt kind of like additional content instead of content that took away from being Mario. And
Yeah.
they could definitely do some cool stuff in that kind of space.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, interesting.
Mhm.
I really
It
don't
is.
think this is a very realistic prediction, but I like the idea of it.
It is neat though.
And
I really thought you were going into Mario Cinematic or like Nintendo Cinematic Universe
no,
with the start of this call. Like,
oh, I can't
where's
predict that
the
right now.
Legend of Zelda
No,
movie? And
I can't
because
do that.
like it's very
Oh,
possible
it's
that
probably
that
going to happen. I
happens.
mean, there's just money waiting to be made, so why not?
Exactly.
Jeez.
Um, that's fun. Okay. My final prediction, we're out of TV realm, but we're into the realm of books because as we all know, Elden Ring was the absolute juggernaut that smashed through 2022 and will continue to smash through 2023 and beyond. But an interesting detail that we all know about Elden Ring, it was definitely hyped up in the marketing, is that George R. R. Martin, famous acclaimed writer, Song of Ice and Fire hero, shout out to George, one of the best authors I've ever read. And take your time with Winds of Winter, man. Like, when it's ready, it's ready. We love you. Don't rush. Um, that's not even sarcastic. I really just feel that way because holy shit, does he get some hate mail? But anyway, he's fantastic. He was marketed heavy on it. He did a lot of the writing for the backstory of the game, which was really, really fucking cool as a huge fan of both him and From Software. I was thinking, what other writers are going to get in on games now because we've set that sort of precedent? And then it clicked like there's an obvious answer to this because if you remember, Alan Wake,
Mm-hmm.
uh, like cult classic has gotten a sequel in the works. It's going to come out, and that game is heavily based, or at least heavily inspired, on Stephen King's work. In the initial Alan Wake, the opening line of dialogue is a Stephen King quote. So it is not being subtle about it. So I thought to myself, Stephen King is a cool guy. He would 100% be in if he got contacted by a studio. And so I think he is going to do some writing, not for an adaptation of one of his books, but for a brand new horror game. Stephen King is going to be contracted as a
Wow.
writer.
That is a wicked prediction. Holy shit.
Yes, it is unlikely, perhaps,
Hmm.
but holy shit, if I snipe that, like pre-order
That's
purchase,
amazing.
I'm 100%
Honestly, yeah,
in.
that's my new favorite prediction. You have taken my crown from the Xbox mini fridge and Fable Ales for this year.
I don't know about that.
Coolest prediction for
But
sure. I can totally see that happening. I think it would just come
yeah.
down to I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if someone like him had already been contacted. I think it just comes down to, what is his bandwidth as a writer, and would that be something
Mhm.
he'd want to do?
But
Because it would be great.
that's the crazy thing about Stephen King is he's such a cool dude. I feel like he'd be in. And also he's like amazing. Like he just churns out. Like he is the antithesis of George R. R. Martin. Like he just writes at a pace that no other writer is able to match. So he's like, "Oh, write for a video game? Sure, that'll take me 5 months. Done. Here you go. Also, here's another sequel to Doctor Sleep. Like here, like
Fair
I
enough.
just had I had a free weekend, so
That is a wicked, wicked Cool. Now you wrote as a horror game, right? Did you have anything else about that, like what a topic could be, or like anything like
I
that? No.
didn't. I feel like it was enough of a out
Yeah,
there
I mean it
prediction.
is.
I didn't need more
I'm
detail.
not saying
And
add for points. Just
yeah,
curious.
I don't know. Stephen King, he's got a lot of really unique stuff. Like he's quite over the board. He's got monster stuff. He's got like sci-fi kind of things. He's got really small slice of life, like
Mm.
just crazy people. He's got like
You
he's got
know,
a
you,
historical fiction one about stopping the JFK assassination. Like he can do anything.
from the little bit I know about him, and what's interesting because I think like from George R. R. Martin, like his style and like genre really seems to match with kind of Elden Ring and sort of that sort of
Mm.
environment, like the medieval kind of knights and kings kind of stuff.
Very like
Um,
deep kind of like
yeah,
war-based backstories
yeah,
and
exactly.
stuff.
And so
Yeah.
for Stephen King, like for me, what came to my head originally, I would love to see him. From what I know, like what he writes about is something like Control. Like if he was writing for a
Yeah.
Control sequel or something, like those weird sort of inexplainable paranormal type of weird stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like I could see that working
Yeah,
for
if
him.
it's like an under the dome kind of thing, or like a
Hmm.
that other one that has like aliens kind of like
Oh my
weirdly out
god,
of
I don't
nowhere.
know.
It's Tommy
Avatar.
Knockers, like yeah. But I could see it, like he definitely goes into some like supernatural kind of
Hmm.
crazy stuff. That would be
I
so
like it. I
cool.
like it a
Man, I
lot.
would love that game.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, let me give you my last prediction. It's definitely not as bold as yours, but I think it's
Mhm.
something that could be quite exciting. So, as we all know, one of the greatest studios on the planet, Insomniac Games, doesn't miss everybody. Everything they put out is just a complete masterpiece, I would say, at least in terms of action. They've got these great
Mhm.
franchises. They got Spider-Man, they got Ratchet and Clank, and those are great games. But here's the thing, it's a bit of a gradient, right? It's a bit of a gradient. We got Ratchet and Clank, which is, I mean, it's got a story, there's dialogue and whatever, but let's be honest, I could play that game if I really wanted to, pay very little attention to the story. I'm there for the combat and the movement and the different weapons and all the action and the crazy
Mhm.
explosions and all this stuff. So that's their game, Ratchet and Clank. That's the whole series there. And of course, then they also
Mhm.
have Spider-Man, which is, I would argue, a bit of a step down in terms of only focusing on action. It's got some nice narrative moments, some great characters, obviously, in the Spider-Man universe, but still very much an action-focused game, swinging around the city, doing your missions, using your powers as Spider-Man or as Miles Morales. Now, let's not forget, everybody, that there is a third game coming in development from Insomniac, focusing on one Logan, aka Wolverine. And my prediction is that this game will be very much in the third style, which is very narrative focused, in a
Ooh.
way that some may say resembles Naughty Dog, another famous, obviously PlayStation studio. Because Naughty Dog's games like Uncharted, Last of Us, there is a lot of action as well,
Mhm.
but I would say that those games are less about the action and more about the narrative, especially The Last of Us.
Mhm.
Obviously, the
Agreed.
action's still good, and I'm not saying it's bad in any of those games. Maybe their
Mhm.
first Uncharted, but it's definitely more focused on the characters and the
Yeah.
the narrative side of it. And I think that's what I'm kind of driving at here. Is I think that Wolverine will be Insomniac's. They're going to be marketing Spider-Man 2 a lot this year, but we're going to get some content, some trailers or extended looks at more of Wolverine throughout the year, and it's going to really be emphasized that this game is a lot focus will be put on Logan's personality and his relationships, whoever they give to him in this game. I thought one suggestion could be Nightcrawler. I know there's a lot of lore around the two of them being actually like quite good friends, and it's one of the only like friends that Logan is known to have in a lot of material. So just somewhere, to explore more of his personal side. Still, obviously, the action stuff in there as well. But just a bit of a left turn from what Insomniac usually does, with more of the action focus coming first.
At first glance, that seems like a very weird prediction, but it actually would be really cool and has potential because, like, obviously Logan's a very like aggressive character, and so you think action first, like he slices first, asks questions later. But when you think about it, like a lot of the stuff we've gotten from him recently, like the most recent Logan movie was very like character based, right? Like it was a lot of like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it was so story versus action. And then like he's kind of almost could have like a Kratos sort of thing where he's very like got to come to terms with being more vulnerable, and like that kind of like aggressive character has obviously God of War has done it in a way that's like very narrative first, and he could have a similar kind of story in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
could actually see that being legitimately like a better version of the game than just going like full Logan doesn't give a shit, smokes a cigar, and then kills you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a bit of a change up, right? And I was kind of relating it to Guardians of the Galaxy and how I was thinking that they had to change those characters so much from what you expect from the MCU in a lot of ways. Obviously, the humor still sticks through, but if it's just a one-to-one replica, I think people will be less interested in it. Just in the same way with this, I think people already know Wolverine is always going to be the claws and the killing and all this stuff. But let's take this a slightly different way, similar to, I guess, to the Logan movie. But not everyone would have seen that. Most people still know like cartoon, kind of Wolverine type of setting. And so this is just be something different. And, similar to people are always like, oh, what's Naughty Dog's next project? Like, will it be another kind of narrative third-person game, or will they try something different? Well, why don't we ask that question about a studio like Insomniac as well? So, yeah, there we have it. Can't wait for Wolverine, by the way. Oh, my God. And Spider-Man 2, Kate, this year. Oh, my God.
It's going to be amazing. Is going to be a big hang up. That is, it's going to be just amazing.
So,
yeah, these are some good predictions. I hope we're at least, more successful than we were last year.
The way I look at it is that any points that we score really are things we're going to be happy about for the most part. Aside from my Xbox prediction with Game Pass going up in price, really we'd be happy for any of these things to be true. So let's just hope we earn any kind of points, and that'll be really fun. And of course, so that'll wrap up our predictions for this year, but we'll have the same competition the start of next year to see who gets to choose a game for the other person. And I will play Fury on the show for the show coming up in the next few months or weeks, whenever that ends up being. So before we get out of here, though, let's close the show the way we always do with a listener mail question from one of our lovely audience members. And remember, everybody, if you would like to write in and be part of listener mail, just like our question today, you can do so by writing into us at cloudcontrolpod@proton.me, or get in touch with us on Twitter or in the comments or wherever you're watching this. We just appreciate it. So interact with us if you'd like, and you get your question read out and answered, just like our question today, which Kate will read for us now.
This is a devious question because it seems simple at first, and then it really isn't. But this is the good old classic, what is your desert island game? But it doesn't just mean like, what's your favorite game that you would want to play? You got to consider like, this is, you are stuck on a desert island for, a potentially infinite amount of time. Assuming that you have the survival skills to make it more than a week, you are trapped on this desert island. You are allowed to have one game with you. What is that game? And then as a further clarification is you apparently have Wi-Fi, so don't worry about that. You've got that sweet internet connection. But the caveat to the internet is that, so you can play a game that is online, like you, James, could pick Fortnite as your game, like a PvP kind of thing. But to scale it back and make it a little bit more challenging is that you cannot play this game with your friends. So like no partying up, no voice chat, no making friends online to play with. Because
no making friends. People message you gotta ignore them. you gotta
ignore them. You have your chat set to like ignore all messages. You're muted because obviously if you were stuck on a desert
you got
island,
sand in your mic. You got sand in your mic. You couldn't use it.
Sand in your mic. That's right. It doesn't work. And I mean, obviously you'd be lonely, so you'd want to just be social, and that would be the clear answer to whatever game my friends are playing. So I'm hanging with my friends. So you can still pick Fortnite, but you're not playing it with your crew. You're playing it exclusively alone.
That's
and
right.
Yeah, this was tough because my first thought was like, oh, Bloodborne. I love Bloodborne. I'll never get tired of Bloodborne. But when I think about it, like that's only so much content in Bloodborne. And,
I know that's the problem.
I might need it for a while.
That's the problem. So I remember we answered this, I think, before on we did like a get to know us quiz or something. So I was trying to think back to that, and I think originally one of my first answers, or the first thing that came to my mind, was Smash Bros. Just because, especially if you have online, and hypothetically it's going to work as well as Switch Online can work, then that's kind of an evergreen content to play, right? Like Smash just kind of never gets tiring. You have endless characters to practice, and you could really hone your skills for eventually when you get rescued, you can play against your friends again. So I thought that would be a good choice.
What a return to society.
That's right. So I thought that would be kind of a good choice. But again, like, how much could you really play? And if you're stranded by yourself, like, would it really be that fun? And so what I ended up landing on for this time, which I think I'd be pretty excited about actually, would be Final Fantasy XIV Online. And I know that you can't use you can't use it for social capabilities Like I couldn't partner it with my friends and whatever. But at the same time, that game is just, it always wins like best ongoing game. There's so many content updates. You would have at very least like the amount of content and story in that game, because I know it's renowned for like having a good story too. It's not just an MMO. It's like, it's actually got like a Final Fantasy quality, you know, interesting story. The amount of time it would take me to even get through that content would be longer than I would be able to stay alive on a desert island. You know, and even if I managed to do it, there's so many classes and races of characters you can be. You could just roll a new character and have a different experience. And I just think for the mass of content alone, you know, and the different skills trees and all this type of stuff, crafting your equipment, MMO would just provide the right amount of variety for, you know, that situation. If I could only have one game.
That is a good answer. I definitely consider a style of game like that. And I feel like I've kind of taken it in a similar way, but I've gone totally dark horse. Like I've gone the rogue evil version of that answer.
Oh my god, is it Maple Story?
Oh my god, no. So no, the problem is Maple Story, it's not getting updates. So like you need something that's evolving with you, because like I consider, I was like, okay, after the Bloodborne train, I was like, well, what about Elden Ring? It's like Bloodborne, but I played 160 hours and like I could run through it with every single weapon and every single like type of challenge run, and that would be awesome. But it's still finite content, right? Like there's only so much. I'm not going to play tons of, I mean, I would play PvP if that's literally all I had to do, but like it's not the same. So I really sat down and thought to myself, like, what online games do I play? And they're few and far between. But there was a Katie that exists one year in my dark years where I played League of Legends.
No, don't do it.
I think I would pick League of Legends because the reasons I don't play League of Legends now are reasons that actually get reversed to be positive for the desert island, because I like HOTS because they're quicker matches. It's less competitive and it's easier to hang out with my friends. But I'm not hanging out with my friends on the desert island. More competitive means I've got more chance to like sit and hone skills and improve. And longer matches, that kills time, which is what I have in abundance and is a problem. And they release new stuff, always new champions coming out. I would be climbing the ranked ladder. If I'm muted and there's sand in my mic, it means that people can't flame me after the game. So I'm not involved in the toxic community. I'm just sitting doing my thing.
Oh my god. This is the funniest answer in the world.
It sounds stupid, but it's infinite content and it would keep you engrossed, and that anger just leads you to either get off the island or to just sit down and be like, you know what, I'm getting out of gold. These scrubs are not gonna know what's gonna hit them when I pull out Braum Jungle, and I'm fucking going for it.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah. Jesus Christ. You know what's so funny about that? I would bring that game too, because it would make my decision a lot easier. Am I going to play League of Legends or try and build myself a raft? I'm going to fucking try and build the raft, because God forbid I'm spending any time on that game. I would be saved instantly.
Here's the thing, man. Once you go down the League rabbit hole, you get sucked into it. You get trapped. It's either you don't play League of Legends or your whole life is League of Legends. And so, you know, I've got it made.
Listen, I don't want to yuck anyone else's yum, but I'd also just rather wander off into the jungle with the poisonous snakes and panthers than sit at my computer for 10 seconds and play League of Legends.
Yeah, I'm going evil 2023. What am I saying? We're 2 days into the year and I've already gone down the dark path.
Oh my god. Well, there you have it, everybody. It is a chaotic start to 2023. And everyone should come to my deserted island and we can have a Final Fantasy 14 party instead of jungling and laning and whatever the fuck else you do in that stupid game. Anyways. Oh man, this has been a great episode, Kate. This is what a great start to the year. Good luck on your predictions. This has been a fun show as always, like we do every year. And everyone out there, just one last reminder for you too. Play As Dusk Falls, because that game, a lot of fun with some friends. But that's going to do it for the episode this week, everybody. So thank you as always for joining us. We'll be back next week with, I think, a return to just regular good old episodes now that the end of the year kind of wrap up is done. And so it should be a blast. We'll see you then. And remember, this has been Cloud Control. the gaming podcast that's not just good, it's good enough. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.